Hi there guys, welcome back into my studio. So today what I thought I'd do is run through the various tools that I use and that can be used to create Scratchboard art. Now there are quite a lot of different tools available that you can use to do Scratchboard. So really, as I've said before, anything that can scratch the top layer of ink off the board can be used to create Scratchboard art. So I've seen people use quite a lot of different things from sort of the tools that I've got out here in front of me today to things like sandpaper and also even things like ink removers and magic sponges to actually remove the black ink off the board. So realistically you can try anything. A lot of different things can give a lot of cool textures. So things like wire brushes as well, some people use just to create a really sort of crazy texture on the board. So realistically you can try anything, and that's almost the fun with Scratchboard. You can try any tool and see what it creates. But I thought I'd run through the exact tools that I use. Now some of these tools I'll use in every single piece and I'll tell you which ones they are. And other tools I don't use as much, but I still use them quite often for more specific textures or more specific techniques really. So starting over here on the left hand side, we've got a variation in craft knives. Now I'm showing you these, basically any one of these will work absolutely fine. So the first one I ever had was this one here. Now this is just a craft knife that you can get from Hobbycraft in the UK, but any sort of hobby store, Amazon, any place like that will do tools such as this. I just wrapped around some, this is the tape you get with a tattoo gun, just so that it's a little bit softer when I was holding it in my hand. And then the blade on the end of here is a number 11 blade, if I'm correct. And then basically you just twist it, it comes out, and then you just pop it back in. But do just be careful because it can be quite sharp doing that. But this tool worked amazing for quite a few years for me. Another variation that I use is one from a company called Slice. So the difference in this one is that the blade that comes with it isn't a steel blade, it's a ceramic blade. So I find that these last a lot longer than the steel blades. So I can create multiple artworks with just one blade, whereas I'd be changing the steel blade multiple times within a single artwork when I'm using that one. So that's why I upgraded to the Slice tool, but like I say, this one will work absolutely fine. And then finally, I've got my Swan Morton craft knife as well. Again, you can change the blades on this one. These are steel blades, but they do last a little bit longer than what I found the generic steel ones do. And again, these come in various sizes with various ends, so you can create a lot of different techniques with them. But any one of those would work absolutely fine. Now, the other tools that I will use in every piece are tattoo needles. But these, I think I bought these ones off Amazon, and you can just get an assortment of different sizes. There's no particular brand that I use. I use more specifically the sizes. So to begin with, I don't know if it's sort of being picked up on camera, but this one is a single tattoo needle. So it's a very, very thin sort of single point tattoo needle. I'll use this if I'm creating really thin wispy type fur, or if I'm just doing sort of a couple of really thin flyaway bits of fur just to sort of give a bit more realism, but I'll show you how that works later. The second one that I use most often is this one. Now this is called I think it's a weave pattern. So there's 3 tattoo needles one side and then 2 on the other side where they sort of interlock, almost sort of one on top of the other. And this is really good for creating those base layers of fur. And then finally, this one is similar to the first one. However, instead of having a single point, this has a variation in how many sort of tattoo needles are on the end. So this one is a 9, so it's got 9 single tattoo needles on it, so it creates almost like a thicker fur. again, they come in a lot of different sizes, and what I probably recommend doing is just experimenting, get an assortment of them, and just see what different textures you can create. Now this is a fiberglass brush. Now some people use this to create fur itself. I don't use it to create fur, I use it more for a stippling technique. So I'll just use it just to sort of poke sort of small holes on the board, and it creates like a soft stippling technique. So that's what I use that for. And again, it comes with refillable blades, so you just press the end and then that comes out, and you can replace that. Now this one is a ink eraser pencil from Faber-Castell. So again, if I wanted to sort of remove a large area of ink, or make an area really smooth, like an eye for example, I'd use this just to sort of take away that top layer of ink, and it creates a really smooth sort of white surface. But I'll show you again how we use that in a minute. And then other things that I use every now and again. Now I don't use this in every piece, it will be for a specific technique, and it's more the blade that I'll use. So as you can see, it's different to the craft knife blades, but it's from the same company as Slice. It's just a rounded end blade, and I find that really good when I'm creating skin texture. But again, you don't need all of these to create an artwork by any means. Realistically, all you could do is just use a craft knife, or even just a tattoo needle, and you'll be able to create an artwork. And then just in case there are any mistakes, what I end up doing is using a black India ink or acrylic ink, just that you can dab a paintbrush in there and just remove, or sort of just cover up any mistakes that you've made. And this I find is really good. Similarly, you can use the Faber-Castell Pit Artist pens. These come in a variety of sizes as well, and nibs, and they again can be used to sort of cover up any mistakes that you may have made. And I find that I do probably use them on quite a lot of pieces, to be honest. So that's the tools that really I have and I use most often. But what I'm going to do now is show you how to use those tools and what techniques you can create with those tools. Right then guys, so I've zoomed in a little bit closer just so that you can see a little bit more clearly what I'm doing on the actual board itself. Now this board is an old board, you can probably tell by all the different scratches and the marks on it that are there. Now this was a board that I was testing a couple of different techniques out on, so it is just a piece of scrap board, so don't worry if you do see these little marks. They're not created with the tools itself. So I'm going to show you what I would use, let's say, a craft knife for. Now I've just chosen a random one, I've just chosen this one. Most craft knives, like I say, the ones that I've got are all going to do roughly the same thing, and the techniques you're going to use are going to be the same. So this can be used for a variety of different things. So it can be used for fur texture. So if I just show you, all you would do is sort of hold it on a slight angle, so that the flat side is sort of facing the board. So you don't want it facing point down for this anyway. And then all you're going to do is just pull it towards you, and then just keep going over those marks that you've done. And it moves really smoothly, really softly as well. Now when creating fur, you're just going to pull towards you and just lift up at the end, just to give that tapered stroke. You're not going to want to sort of push against the board, it just doesn't feel natural. But you can use that to create fur texture, and you can be really light with it, or you can go over your marks and create a heavier stroke, just like that. Now another thing that this is good for is for stippling. So what stippling is doing sort of small dots on the board. So you can hold it sort of face down like this, or you can hold it on a slight angle as well. If I just sort of bring my board down slightly so you can see. Now I will do these quite brightly just so that you can see how to use it. And all you're doing is just creating small dot and dabbing motions. And I'll use this technique if I'm doing anything like a nose or the inside of an ear, and also eyes as well. And it just creates a sort of dotted texture there. So that's that one. So it is quite versatile. You can pretty much do anything with a craft knife in Scratchboard. There's not really much you can't do. Now, the other tool, like I said, that I use quite often are the tattoo needles. Now, these can vary in their sizes and what you can use them for. So one that I use quite often is, like I said, the sort of weaved pattern tattoo needle. Now, I think this is a 5M1, which means there's 5 needles in a weave pattern. So for this, you would hold it sort of side on. Again, not with the 3 tattoos needles facing down or the 2, you want to hold it side on so that you're sort of getting both sides. And then again, same technique, you're just going to pull towards you. And the good thing about tattoo needles is they will bend and they'll flex so that it will stop you going too hard or too bright with your marks too quickly. And it's much easier to get a softer, more subtle texture and stroke with this, much more so than with the craft knife. So I would just use this to cover generally sort of like a large area of fur, and then once I was happy with how that was, I would normally then just come back over with my craft knife and just add in those sort of top layers and those top strokes of fur. So that was that one. And then with the other tattoo needles, so this is just our RL tattoo needle, so our one single tattoo needle. And again, that will just create a single line, whereas the other one will create a thicker line with more, as you can see, it's got more strokes from the actual tattoo needle. So I'll use this one if, let's say, an eyelash that I just want a really thin line for, or if I just want to be really delicate and just get into a very small area, or if I just want a little bit of fur catching the light, just sort of catching the top of the ear or something in regards to that. And then the final tattoo needle I use a lot is this, I think this is a 9RL, so a 9 round liner with 9 tattoo needles. Now, I don't normally use this one for fur, just because I find it sometimes looks a little bit artificial, but some people use it for fur and it will work for fur, but I just don't tend to use it for fur. I tend to use this one for stippling. So again, similar to what we did with the craft knife just up here, this is really good just to sort of poke into the board and create a dotted texture. Now, the reason I'd probably use this over the craft knife is it's a lot quicker. So as you can see how much area I've created just here than how long it took me to create that area just there. So because there's 9 needles on the end, when you push it in, it leaves sort of 9 little dots quite close together. So it covers a large area quite quickly. And then again, you could just come in, press a little bit harder, and just add another layer, and that will create a sort of brighter stippling technique just there. Now, moving on to some of the other tools. So this is a fibreglass brush, like I mentioned. Now, as you can imagine, if that was created with 9 needles, this probably has about 100 just on the end of it. So it does create a very large area of stippling quite quickly. But the downside is it can be slightly less accurate, and it can make it look a little bit, like I say, more artificial. So for this one, I would just be very, very delicate and very, very light. But this would cover a much larger area. So especially if, let's say, I'm creating a much bigger piece, maybe something either 9 by 12 or 11 by 14, I'd use this a lot for the nose, the eyes, the ears, that sort of thing. But some people use this actually for fur texture. So for fur texture, I'd just make it a little bit shorter. And some people use it to create a thick looking fur. So as you can see, most of the tools are quite versatile. You can use them for quite a lot of different things. And again, you would probably want to come back over this with your craft knife just to make it look a little bit more natural. And then the final couple of tools, so I use this ink eraser. So again, quite inaccurate, so I would use it on a sort of larger piece, or only in a specialized area. But like a normal pencil, you would just rub out the ink. And then again, the sort of harder you press, if I show you, I don't know if that's picking up. So if you press a lot harder, it's going to take away a lot more. Ink. But again, I'd use this if, like I say, there was just an area that I wanted to be nice and smooth, or if there was an area that I just wanted to add that touch of highlight, maybe to sort of the, like I say, the eye or the nose. And then finally, a tool that I use for skin. Well, a blade more than a tool itself. So with the slice tools, this blade is interchangeable with the other tools, with the other handles. So realistically, it's just this blade on the end. Now, because it's that shape, I find it can move in any direction. Whereas if I show you with my craft knife, if I was to try and do that, it sort of jumps and skips and it's not as smooth. So what I'll use this for is, let's say after I've put down, if I was doing skin, I'd normally use a bit of a stippling technique. So let's say I just put down that stippling technique. I'd then go over the top in a figure of 8 sort of pattern, making really, really small and tight figure of 8s. And it just creates a skin texture. Now I'm not even lifting off during this. All I'm doing is almost just this scribbling texture. And that's because it's just rounded on the end, so it just allows you to do that. But if I wanted to do that, like I say, with this, it would be quite difficult because it ends up catching into the board when you're trying to do it. So those are the tools that generally I use for most pieces. So I hope you've enjoyed this one, and I'll see you again in the next video.